Today is September 24th, 2007. We're here to take the oral history of Joe Fugg. My name is Rosalind Benjet, and our videographer is Ruth Andrus. Joe, tell us about your family.
I had one brother, and my father and mother were Isaac Funk and Fanny Funk. They came to this country probably 1911 from Russia, Benjet near Kiev. And I don't know what else you want to know about my family.
Okay. When they came to this country, where did they settle?
They came through Ellis Island. They were there a short time, and they had a friend who got to the United States first, who was in Dallas, who said, "Come on down here, we got a lot of work." So they came on down here. There wasn't any work, so they went back to New York City for, I guess, a couple of years. They came back again, and this time Papa found work, and lived in Dallas all the rest of our lives.
Were you born in Dallas or in New York?
In Dallas.
And the year?
1922.
And what did your parents do for a living?
Well, they both worked when they first got here, and then Mama quit working after a while. My father was a tailor. His first job was at A. Harris. And if you want to hear a story about that, I'll tell you. Otherwise, I'll go on.
We do.
He went down there to A. Harris, where he thought they had, he was told they were opening, and they did. They had an opening for a tailor. So they asked him if he was a tailor, and he said, yeah. But he'd never run a sewing machine in his life. Right off the bat, he ran a needle from the sewing machine through his finger. But another landsman says, okay, we'll fix you up. So they went to a doctor that fixed him up. He came back, and he became a very good tailor. Then after, I don't know how long a period of time, he opened a men's store, Funk's Men's Shop, on Main Street. I think it was 1511 or something like that, right across from, there was a Gus Roos across the street, and it was a block down from Neiman Marcus. And they did okay there till the Depression came along and put them out. Now the first store, though, was on Elm Street down by Pearl and Elm, and that was a men's shop too that mainly catered to where they made the clothes for them. They measured and made the clothes right in that shop. But the Depression finished that one off. And after a while, I think he had a shot at a grocery store. No, in time, we had a shoe shine parlor came after that on Elm Street between the Rialto Theater and Queen Theater on Elm Street. And the shoe shine shop, and they did pressing and blocked hats in the back. But then it got things after shortly before the war, he got in on this to go back to Main Street and started a store there. And was there, I don't know, things were tough. And then, I don't know, about 1940, after the war at some point, they was out of that business. So, but he was a clothing man is what he was, men's clothing. And that's all he really liked to talk about.
Where did you live when you were a child?
3705 Colonial Avenue in South Dallas.
Can you tell us something about what the neighborhood was like when you were growing up there?
Yeah, I can tell you. It was a very fine neighborhood of ordinary people. The streetcar track ran in front of our house. They called it the Irvy streetcar line. Went down, I think, as far as Pine Street, and they turned it around. They put the and go back up to downtown. The neighborhood was hard-working people, and they brought their children up to be hard-working, honest people.
And what kind of games did the children? What did you do to amuse yourself when you were a child?
I was into athletics quite a bit. Whenever I had a chance, I'd play baseball, football, basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't really a great student in my early days of grammar school, but then about the 6th grade, I figured out I better start learning something, and so I cut down on my athletics and started learning a few things. And then I was a decent student in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But the neighborhood was really a great bunch of people, and the high school still have an alumni association. And I see a lot of my friends still there.
And that was?
Forest Avenue High School.
Mm-hmm.
That ended its career with that name in 1956 when it became Madison High. Mm-hmm. That was while segregation was going along, and the neighborhood had become majority were black, and all the white people were moving out.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your school experiences. What activities, what interests did you have when you were in school?
Well, we'd have to go to high school. There wasn't much activities in grammar school. Mm-hmm. And in high school, I played on the tennis team for my last 3 years there. I had a brother who was a very good student. All the teachers remembered him. And my Latin teacher she was really fond of my brother. And she expected me to be like he was. Well, I took 2 years of Latin, and then the Latin interfered with my playing tennis. So I dropped the Latin and kept playing tennis. And she never forgave me for that. There was no National Honor Society for me or anything else. But I made decent grades, and in mathematics, I made 100 in algebra and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. Now I think they teach algebra in 5th or 6th grade in school, but then it was a big deal. And but in mathematics, I was good, and we had wonderful teachers at Forest Avenue High School. There was no discipline problem at all. If you did something wrong, the guy carrying a big stick would come over and tell you to grab your ankles, and he'd pop you one. And you wouldn't go tell your parents about it either, because they would hit you harder. So there was no discipline problem with where I went to school and when I went to school. It was just a great bunch of teachers, very dedicated, and that was through grammar school too, as far as the teachers were concerned. My generation was very lucky as far as our young life was. I worked on Saturdays, when I was going to school.
Did you work for your father or somewhere else?
No, there were 3 clothing stores, men's clothing stores, right together. Mm-hmm. And they were tremendous competitors, but good friends. So I went to work for one of the competitors. But it was an experience. I learned how to look at people and talk to them. And I think I'm naturally rather shy, but you got to get out. I realize you got to get out of that at some point along the way. Mm-hmm. And though I've never been really outgoing guy, I don't think I'm shy anymore.
Did your family attend the synagogue when you were a child?
Yeah, they attended a good as Occam. Mm-hmm. But they were not necessarily the pillars of the church. The women weren't anything anyway, good as Occam. Women didn't count too much, and Papa was not all of that into it. Mm-hmm. But he would go to where he could talk, outside. He could, on holidays, he could talk with all the rest of them, and that was pretty much my family. My mother and father's religion was not real powerful. As a matter of fact, when it came time for me to go to Sunday school, it was a question of where to go. Next door lady across the street from us, Sarah Hart, was teaching at Temple Emmanuel, so she drove there. So the natural for me just go across the street and go to Temple Emmanuel for Sunday school, which I did, and I was bar mitzvahed and confirmed. And I was bar mitzvahed at Temple. That was in the days they didn't have bar mitzvah.
That was unusual, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I was into religion a little bit when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's where the religion came from.
Right. Did your family celebrate any Jewish holidays?
All of them.
Mm-hmm.
We celebrated every Jewish holiday,
mm-hmm.
and we weren't much on Shabbos, but the high holidays, mm-hmm. including Passover, which was a big deal.
What happened then?
There was a family called Shane, S-H-A-N-E, I believe it was. It had a big group, maybe 20 to 25 people in a long table, and it was great food, wonderful food, but they went through the whole thing, through the whole service without a glimpse. So about a third of the way through, if eating got done and everything, I'd go to sleep. They put me on the couch and I went to sleep. But I never will forget what a big deal Passover was. And in fact, I even got to stay out a couple extra days besides the one day, which just because I could do it. But it wasn't because of religion. It was very nice. And the Shanes, and in time I'll think of who all the other people, Gillers were over there. And one of the Gillers was married to an Andrus girl. And so that brought her family into it, Dave Andrus. So the Gillers were there, and just a great time. So that was a big part of my religion in doing the holidays. But we always went to I always went to services on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and of course while I was going to, before I got confirmed at Temple, I'd go on Saturday mornings. And I enjoyed my time at Temple Emmanuel Religious School. I had a great guy, and Rabbi Lefkowitz was there, and a rabbi named Brav was the guy there when I got bar mitzvah. And Temple Emmanuel, by the way, doesn't have anything to do with me, but had quite some outstanding rabbis that I was very fortunate to get to be with. Rabbi Olin, Jerry Klein, who was a great friend of ours. And so that's kind of my temple thing. I'm not really strong anymore, but I go to the high holidays.
What interactions did your family have with other Jewish families?
Well, as I was real young and I didn't get into it much like my brother did, the scholar, and a great guy, by the way. They had a place on Forest Avenue, about a block west of Colonial Avenue, that was called the Arbiter Ring. It was a little masonry building. Seemed like a big building to me. It's probably very small. That the Jewish people, it was where a lot of them learned English. They learned Hebrew. They taught. And the Arbiter Ring, I think, means a labor ring. And that was where they had got a lot of social togetherness. Then somewhere long before World War II, the Arbiter Ring disbanded. Politics took over as far as the communism thing, and some thought that's the way they ought to support Russia more, and some of them said, no, we're not going to do that. We're out of Russia, and we don't think too much of that. And they couldn't get together, and it just totally broke up. My father was one that was not for supporting Russia. And but there were some good guys that did. That they stayed friends after the Arbiter Ring. Back about it, I was in high school, and They still met probably 30 people would meet maybe once a month, and they'd sing songs and have a big meal, and it was really wonderful. And the children would come and enjoy themselves, and that was pretty much their social life. As far as that's concerned, it went from the arbiter ring to the people, and the people from both sides came on those meetings. It wasn't just the for and against group, but there were some leanings towards communism. Certainly social. Well, most of them were social people. They wanted to do good things for people, but there was a little rift there that. It's probably other people know more about that history than I do, who are a little older than me. But I do know it broke up. But my brother learned to write Hebrew and everything. As I say, he was a scholar. And he died when he was 52 years old after a massive heart attack at 42. He was 9. Leon Funk was 9 years older than I. And so I had two fathers, actually. And Mama was a great woman.
Did your family have any interactions with the Gentile community?
Well, yeah, the people on both, yes. The neighborhoods, you walk down the street in those days and people sat on the porch in the summertime. So you interact with the neighbors. There weren't a whole lot of organizations that they were in. They were mixed. But, and in business, Papa knew a lot of people. When he was making clothing, that part of his business, and all the way through, he had some pretty high-powered customers, including judges and so forth. And I can remember one time when I was young enough to get on somebody's shoulder, the Ku Klux Klan coming down the street with their torches going at night, and but I remember Papa saying some of those judges said, "Funk, you're all right. We'll take care of you," and they took care of them. I mean, we never had any problem from the Ku Klux Klan, but
they never bothered any Jews in Dallas, did they?
I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so.
I wouldn't. They certainly didn't. They certainly spread anti-Semitism. They didn't like blacks, Jews, or Catholics. Didn't care too much for Catholics either, I don't think. But as far as violence towards them, I have no way. I don't know that. I wouldn't be surprised if there were. There was certainly plenty of slander, but physical violence, I do not know of it.
What did you do after high school?
Well, after high school, as I told you, I liked to play, all athletics, and I didn't. My brother taught mathematics at SMU for 3 or 4 years, and so he knew the faculty there, but I didn't want to go to college. I just wanted to get me a job, go to work, and play. That's all I wanted to do. So, sounded like a pretty big bum, wasn't it, huh? But anyway, that they tricked me. They were having an aptitude test at SMU one Saturday, and they tricked me into going in and taking an aptitude test. And I didn't want to go through an aptitude test or anything. But anyway, I took it, and they came out and says I was strong in mathematics and I would make a good engineer. Well, that's okay, but then you got to pay tuition if you go to college. And we didn't have that much money, and but they got me a partial scholarship, and they got me a job after school. I think it was NYA, National Youth Administration. So I got that, and I worked in the laboratory after school, and I cleaned up the civil engineering lab. But people would make test cylinders and break them, and I'd put those concrete cylinders in a wheelbarrow and wheel it outside. So anyway, I started college. And I finished college at SMU. Started at SMU, finished at SMU.
You
By the
studied
time
engineering?
I finished, the war was going on good. And I was got into midshipman school and went to the Navy as a construction man, construction corps. The Seabees they called them then. People never heard of it anymore, but construction battalion. And my schooling, I did okay. I was a decent student because I knew if we were spending that much money, I had to make it worthwhile. So I did. I studied.
And what kind of engineering did you study?
Civil engineering, building things, and designing things. And that worked well for me when I was in the South Pacific in the Navy. We built the airstrips and facilities for the camps.
Can you tell us about your military experience?
Well, I was, first thing they did to me, I went to Honolulu, where they pretty well brought everybody first and then sent them out from there. So after that, they put me on a ship, and I went to Midway Island. There's no natives, there's nobody on Midway Island except for birds, goonie birds. And it was a submarine station where the submarines would refuel and so forth. But it was after the Japanese had tried to take Midway and had taken Midway. And it was not very much happening there. It was we'd get a few scares every now and then. There was a Japanese submarine off the coast or so forth. I never saw a Japanese submarine there. So then I went back to, after probably 8 or 10 months there, I went back to Hawaii. Stayed there a couple of months doing nothing. Then they sent me to Guam. I made a few short stops at Tinian and Saipan and then Guam. And there I was with a unit that maintained a large naval air station. And we brought in charge of the shipping as to how, you can't believe the amount of ships that were in the harbor at Guam. You could look out and you couldn't see the end of them bringing supplies into Guam and leaving Guam with the supplies. And so we had charge of that too. And then while I was still on Guam, we dropped the atom bomb. But we were prepared to go over to Japan. We had people loaded on ships to go at that time. They dropped that first atom bomb, and then the second one, and that did it. But I would always say anybody, I haven't found anybody who was in the South Pacific who thinks Truman did wrong with his atom bomb, because it saved a lot of people's lives at that point. Now, history has shown somebody was going to make the atom bomb, whether we had it, it was going to happen. So when people criticize Truman, take up for him. The guy he did the right thing according to, I bet you, everybody in the South Pacific. If you were on Okinawa or wherever you were glad to hear it. So that's pretty much my experience. I didn't shoot any Japanese, but I did. One of the things that we did on Guam was every night you could see the big B-17s and B-24s flying over to drop their bombs on Japan, and they were really wreaking havoc. It was must have been terrible. I didn't feel sorry for them, but it was terrible, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, what did you do when you came back to Dallas after the war?
1 month I was back here, I got married.
Oh.
In fact, I I got engaged on my embarkation leave.
Oh.
And so we wrote letters while we were gone. V-mail, it was a little thing you could fold up and ship.
How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife at a social of young people in the gymnasium of Temple Emmanuel. And I didn't know her then, but she was with a friend of mine that I knew, a lady friend that I knew. And I just saw her. I don't even know whether I said talk to her or not, but she looked nice. She really looked pretty to me, and I thought I'd like to know her better. Well, I got to know her. Now, am I talking too much here?
No, not at all.
Anyway, I thought I'd like to know her better, and so I called her. This lady friend that brought her was dating age for me, so I was thinking, now, how am I going to not hurt her feelings and find out the address of the girl I want to know better? But I didn't have a good answer for that. I just called her and asked her. She told me, and it was very nice. Everybody stayed friends. And I had a date with her. First date was on Halloween night. We're in the movie. And she was staying with a sister on Belle Claire in University Park. And I liked her, and apparently she liked me. And we became friends. I was here I think on that night, shortly after that, she said, "Will you go to my father's funeral?" So, well, yeah, okay. So I went to Fort Worth to the funeral.
She was from Fort Worth?
Huh?
She was from Fort Worth?
No, she was from Cisco, Texas. Mm-hmm. That's where she graduated high school. She was born in Dallas also. But Fort Worth was where the burial place of the family was. So I went over there, so that was the second time I saw her. It was at the funeral. And then we just saw each other and got to know each other and liked each other. And I guess, but I didn't know her but for about 2 or 3 months before it was longer than that. 8 or 10 months before I went to midshipman school, came back on embarkation leave, and decided, maybe this would be a good idea to marry this girl. And that was a good decision, because she was a wonderful person. We lived together for over 60 years, married, lived together. And so she was really great, and she brought up 2 good kids, and she was a hard-working girl, because we didn't have anything to start with.
So you got married right when you returned?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to get married by proxy so I could get home quicker on the points. I'd get more points if I was married. She didn't go for that. Mm-hmm. She made me wait another 4 or 5 months.
So you got married?
Which was the right decision.
You got married here in Dallas?
Yes, Mm-hmm. Melrose Hotel. And then the good deal was, our honeymoon, I had to go to New Orleans to get discharged from the Navy. So we had a honeymoon in New Orleans. The government paid for it. We started out good. Mm-hmm. Then we had to make a living after that.
Yeah. Where did you live when you were first married?
We had a 1-room. We had a bedroom. We shared the kitchen and bathroom with a grandmother and her about a 17-year-old daughter. No air conditioning. Right outside our bedroom window was a big compressor for a cooler that was in the grocery store right next door with the heat coming in. We did have a little fan, but it was not really uptown. It was kind of a tough beginning. But we made a living. It was okay.
Where was it?
On a street called Llano Street, in the Belmont streetcar line went down that street. And it was called Belmont there. And it was the same car that you could have caught in front of my house in South Dallas. Went all the way out to SMU. In fact, I drove that car to SMU many a time. And that's where we lived, and it wasn't much. That's in the Greenville area, off of Greenville. And then I got a job working for the city, designing sewer systems and water systems. And made $190 a month, which we could live on. And they raised me to $230 a month when I said, this isn't enough, I can't stay here for that. but I couldn't stay for that either. So I got a job with an architectural firm, and I did the structural design for them for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
They were very nice people, and I enjoyed working for them. But after a while, the checks started bouncing, my paychecks, and that wasn't a good idea. That was not a good thing. So after a while, I had to leave and find something else. But while I was looking for somebody else, I went to a SMU football game, SMU Baylor, Vernon and I did. And at the end of the game, the guy turns around to me and he says, "Is your name Joe Funk?" I said, "Yeah, that's what my name is." I didn't know who he was. But when I first came back and started looking for work before I took the job with the city, I'd gone around to every large construction company, because I wanted to go into being a builder and not a design guy, which I did. And he said, "My name is Robert E. McKee, Jr.," which that was a big company. They're no longer around, but they was a good big company. And he said, "You still looking for a job?" I said, "Well, I got a job now," but he said, "Would you be interested in talking about a job?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, this is my phone address. Come to my house tomorrow morning." I said, "Well, tomorrow morning, Sunday." And he says, "That's okay. Would you come on?" I said, "Yeah, I did." So they hired me. I went into the estimating office. Of course, here I am at a desk again, which I didn't want, a desk job. So I worked in that desk job for, I guess, a year or two. Every now and then they'd send me out in the field, which that made me happy. They were building a Fondren Science Building at SMU. So I thought that was kind of fun. They left me there 6 or 8 months. Then I was back in the estimating again. So we figured a job in New Orleans, a Veterans Administration job in New Orleans, and we were low. And Mr. McKee Sr. was in town, and we were way low. You don't want to be low like that. We were all the estimating department figured they were going to fire the whole bunch of us. He came in the next morning. He says, "I looked over our bid. I'm happy. We've got a good job. Anybody here want to go and build this building?" Well, I always knew not to volunteer for anything. I knew that. But it was so exciting to me to go build a 17-story building. I said, "Yeah, I'll go." So sure enough, I did. They said they took me up on it, sent me to New Orleans. We were there from 49 to 52. My daughter was born in New Orleans. We had a 3-year-old son. And it was it was hard work down there. I had a hard super. The guy in charge of me was tough, and the guy that ran the division for McKee was tough. And we'd work from sun up, sundown, and later, 6 days a week. Sometimes I'd take a flashlight in the morning to get ready for the construction to keep going, to get that concrete to keep going up. Hard work, tough on burn. But she learned a lot in New Orleans. She learned all about fish and cook and shrimp. She next door neighbor to us. This area we lived in, found to live in, were all out-of-town people. I mean, there was no New Orleans person lived in that bunch. They were all, so they bounded together, and they would cook. She learned how to be a great cook, more so than before we left. And the next door neighbor was really, she knew everything. She was a Navy wife who had moved all around the world. Back then, they were probably 10 or 15 years older than we. And it was a tough life in New Orleans. We came back to Dallas, and I worked on the Federal Reserve Building in Dallas, which is torn down by now, and Statler Hilton Hotel. I was on that one, which you probably never heard, the Statler Hilton Hotel. Well, anyway, it's down there on Main Street. It's being remodeled now, I understand. It was the hotel here for a while, and I worked for McKee here in Dallas for maybe as 4 years here in Dallas, and finally, I thought I could build a building myself at that point. I thought I knew how to estimate the cost, and I knew how to build a building. So Verna and I, though we didn't have much money, we decided we'd go in business for ourselves. So we did. I told Mr. McKee that I was going to leave, and he says, "Joe, you're a good man, you're making a mistake. This construction business is hard. It's tough." I said, "Yeah, I know it is because I've been working in it. It's hard, I know. But we're going to do it. We're going to leave." So we left and set up an office in our dining room. And that was my office for, maybe 6 months. People, subcontractors come through the living room, sit down in the dining room, and roll the plans out.
Now, where did you live then?
Where did we live?
Yeah.
We lived on Clover Lane. It was between Marsh and Midway, between Northwest Highway and Walnut Hill Lane. It was kind of a development house, but it was a pretty nice house. For us, it was nice. Compared to anything we'd ever had, it was great. And so that's where we were. I did everything in the world. I visited all the lumber yards and talked to the people, trying to get a job. Finally, I got to put what you call a dormer, which is an opening on the second story if you're looking out, for a guy named Irby Mays, which ran a clothing store. Irby Mays was, it so happened that they are the people that wanted it, and I think I probably did that for less than $300. And then I added a little 12 by 18 room onto somebody's house, and that probably was $1,500. And then I put a bathroom in for somebody, did all the level of foundation. I did everything, and then finally I hit a job that a little warehouse job, office, retail in a warehouse for the Gillers, by the way, and Schnitzer, the doctor. Well, they were both, anyway, for them, and the fellow in-law from Barton, Texas. And that was about a $60,000 job, and that got me, and that came about because I went around to every architect's office too, just to get on their bid list, and one of them let me do it, George Edwards. And we did the job. They were happy when we finished, and I was happy. And by that time, I'd gotten another job, and then I started getting work, and we did okay after about it took about maybe a year and a half. About at 6 months, we moved into a one room in a warehouse as our office, but at least we were not in the house anymore. Verna could breathe a little bit better. But Verna she did the books, and Verna worked on the books and as a secretary to answer the phone. Kids come out of school, she go home, take care of the kids. Verna had it a lot rougher than I did. She's the one that made it. But so then we started getting work, and we'd get churches were being built along that time, all kinds of churches, Jewish churches, Christian churches, everything. They just built. So I built a lot of churches, and I guess I built all of the structure for the first Museum of Art. We did all the foundation work, structural steel, everything that you cannot see today, except the basement floor that they didn't put floor covering on. We did it, and that was about that time. That was getting pretty good. That was a pretty good sized job. But from then on, we got enough work. Now there was tough times in the late 70s were the boom time, but in the early 80s, construction was tough. A lot of my competitors went out of business, And I never have built, I only built one house in my career. We built one apartment and one house. But that one house was when I had no work. And I had, 6 or 8 people who had worked for me since I'd been in business. So we bought a piece of property, got some plans, and we built a house. Everybody worked on that house. And there was only one guy that had ever done a job for a house, who was a superintendent on building houses. So we had one guy who knew how to build houses, and we all got in there and we did everything ourselves. By the time we got that job finished, we hit work, gotten commercial work again, and we stayed in business where a lot of my good competitors went out. Then it's been a lot easier the last. Well, we were in business 50 years in May of '06. From the 50 years we'd gone into business in '56. So the last 10 years or 15, people knew who we were, and they knew we were going to give them their money's worth, do what we're supposed to do to the best of our ability, and we just got work. I didn't have to go visit architects anymore in lumber yards because people came to us at that time, and it was an easier life.
What projects were your favorites?
I don't know. I liked them all. I didn't have any favorites. I liked the Museum of Art. We did a pretty good sized remodel for Sheriff Israel. We built an addition on the Temple Emmanuel. We did a Midway Hills Christian Church, which was, I guess, my favorite because the architect and I just blended together. He did a lot of innovative things in that church. And I was I ran that job personally, which I didn't always able to do, but it was a fun job. Now there's a story that goes with that one too. Mm-hmm. I can keep on going for days, but anyway, this you could cut out what you want. But there was a big cross right up on the top of this roof it was not a straight roof, it was an oddball roof, but anyway there's a cross up on top, and we put that cross up there and waterproofed it in, and we couldn't stop it from leaking. It would leak, and we'd try again and it would leak, and finally we tried it they were going to have the openings, dedicating services on a Sunday, and we worked on that thing, and the Saturday afternoon we did a final, we hope it works, and then we put the hose on it and it leaked. So now all we could do is pray for dry weather on the services morning. But sure enough, I was sitting down in the pew, and it started a rainstorm. And it came a rain, but the roof did not leak that morning. He or she was on our side. God was with us. I don't know how that roof stopped leaking, but it stopped leaking. And so that was an interesting thing, I thought. I mean, just luck. I mean, everything, you got to have a little bit of luck as you go along. So I was lucky too, in many ways through my life. I was really lucky when I found Berna at that get together of young people, because she stayed with it. I think she got to quit about 20 years ago. After 30 years, she could retire from the construction. But she was a wonderful lady, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me, more than the construction job. But I enjoyed making the way I made a living. I've always enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was never drudgery. I felt you get through, you can look up and see what you did, and it's very. I've had a very, very lucky life. Very, very fortunate and happy. I'm good.
While your children were growing up, did you belong to a synagogue?
Yeah, we always belonged to Temple Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
Now I belong to Temple Emmanuel and Temple Shalom,
mm-hmm.
because my children went over to Temple Shalom. But And I've got a little disenchanted from time to time with my temples, which it's okay.
Everybody does.
Yeah, but it's yes, we've always belonged. We got as soon as we came back. We in Dallas. We belonged to Temple Emmanuel very solidly.
Hmm. And what would you say? How has the Jewish community changed in Dallas? So since you were a child.
Well, of course, the city of Dallas has changed so much. When I used to go to Temple, I knew everybody. Now I know nobody. Maybe I might see half a dozen or a dozen people that I know. That's the biggest change to me as far as the Temple Emmanuel. It's not a part of any change except that Dallas has gotten to be not like Dallas was. You know, a lot of us old people like it the way it was. But we can't have it the way it was. So it's, you know, we used to have a date, and it was a long drive from South Dallas out to a place called Lobello's on Northwest Highway and Preston Road. That was way out. And we'd take our dates and drive out there. It was a big deal. You'd have an ice cream soda. Maybe you could hold the girls' hands. You never know. You do the best you could. So, you know, that's the big change. Dallas just grew up, and so did the Jewish community grow up. So, you know, and we got a lot of wonderful people that came into Dallas, and it's great. It's just not the same. But I still go to Temple, and I had a great guy, a great friend of ours, Rabbi Klein. He was a great friend of everybody, I think. Mm-hmm. And that's another story. I told him that he needed to keep living, because if he wasn't around when we died, nobody'd know us. We didn't know the rabbis that much. So he agreed to that, but he died less than a week before Bernard did, and here we were. So, but that's he was my tie to Temple Emmanuel. Although Levi Olin, I thought was great also. Just different. They were totally different. But Jerry Klein was just a friend of ours. So that's my Temple.
Tell us about your family today.
My family today?
Yeah.
Well,
you have a daughter and a son.
I have a daughter and a son. You know about when they were born, so you could probably figure out they're up in their 50s. Daughter didn't get married. Happy lady. Son married. Married in '73. Has three daughters, and a very nice wife named Michelle. And these three granddaughters. And now the son, speaking of the family, the son always, when he was 10 or 12 years old, I'd get him on the construction job. He may hose down something, pull nails in the garage. I had him pull nails out of 2x4s, and I paid him so much a nail. So he grew up in the construction business, and he knew, he wasn't any question in his mind what he was going to do. He's going to go be a civil engineer and be a construction man. And he did, and he's a good construction man. And the daughter stayed in college a long time. She's a pretty sharp gal, we bought some boat marinas, one in Lake Louisville, and the Grapevine, to where you put your boats. Mm-hmm. And she, for the first 3 years of that thing, we bought him in '84, '85. She really ran them, because Marshall and I were in the construction business. And then she now is with the marinas, but she's kind of in the management, she keeps them looking right and keeps them up to date and tries to keep the people with the yes attitude. So, and there's several marinas to look after, and that's mainly her thing. And Marshall, the son Marshall, her name's Sandy. And the son's name is Marshall. And Marshall has done very well. He's expanded into the marina business with a partner, his partner, who they went to grammar school together, Stan Johnson. And they've done pretty good. They've expanded marinas. Instead of just in this Dallas area, they have marinas all over the United States, which I don't know how many there is, maybe 6 or 8 of them. I'm a part owner of them, but I don't really know what I got. But anyway, Marshall's been a pretty astute businessman, and I do believe that he believes in my philosophy is to give the guy what they got coming, do the best job you can. And his reputation is a businessman, is a good reputation. And so now they have 3. I have 3 granddaughters from Marshall and Michelle. One of them joined the Peace Corps, and she's in Ecuador, living with an indigenous tribe that has their own language. They live in the rainforest of the Amazons, and it's a tough life. I told her she ought to quit and come home. But she'll probably stick it out because she's been there about 8 months now, and there's no running water, and she's the only American within 2 hours of her. She's having it, but I think she's going to stick with it. She's a special kind of gal. As much as I urge her to come on home, she hadn't come yet. She's a smart little girl. And the other 2, one of them works for the marinas. They've all gotten out of college. The youngest one, the one that's in Ecuador, is 23, 26, 28 is their ages, I think. But anyway, the middle one, Shannon, the Sadie is the one in Ecuador. And Shannon's the next one up, and Shannon works for the marinas. And her big activity was to put on a charity concert. They call it a concert. It's a rock and roll thing out at the marinas for the Heart Association. And they raised about $60,000 last year. It was a good thing. And then she works for the marinas in general. The oldest daughter is a teacher of 3rd grade grammar school in the grammar school that she went to when she was a child. So, and then they all work, they're all diligent, work hard people. So Verna did good in raising Marshall. Marshall did good with his married and the way he brought the kids up. There again, I'm a lucky guy,
You are. What are you most proud of?
Most proud of? I'm not one to be real proud. I mean, I don't know that the word satisfied.
Okay.
I'm not a proud guy. I'm satisfied overall. I've been very lucky. I had good parents. I always had something to eat and a room, bed to go to sleep on. I met a wonderful woman and lived with her for 60 years. That's my biggest success. That's the one that I am really satisfied with. She did a good job on my children. I had wonderful parents. My mother and father were great. So I'm not really a proud guy. I'm just satisfied with the way I worked hard. We all worked hard. But I don't think I have a whole lot of enemies. And I don't think there's a whole lot of people that'll say much against me. I think that's what my father told me, that you need to live good, don't do anything that'll shame the Jewish people. And I try to do that. So I'm satisfied with my life.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to add?
No, I think I didn't say enough about my older brother.
Okay.
I'd like to say something. He's Leon Funk. Was he was an academic guy and a good guy, and I owe a lot to him. I do not believe that my father alone could have gotten me to go to college, but the 2 of them together managed And he has a nice family. He had a son and a daughter that we keep up with very much.
And
one lives in Washington, one in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And he just had the wrong genes. I had the good genes, and he had the bad genes. Although he wasn't much of an athlete either. He was an academic, and maybe he didn't get enough. People didn't know you had to exercise in those days. So maybe he just had a tough break. But I miss him very much, and he's been gone a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was old enough to go to the arbiter ring. He met a whole bunch of Andresses at the arbiter ring. The Andresses was something else. I mean, that was quite a family. And we would eat dinners a lot of time at Dave Andrus's family's house
on Pearl Street.
Huh?
On Pearl Street.
Oh yeah, on Pearl. And two-story house. They was upstairs, Harry and Rahel's place. And I really didn't remember Dave that much because he was way younger than me, or it seemed like he was way younger than me when we were doing that. Lived out there. He's a little bitty boy, and so then he got to be almost as old as me, but in the later years. But he was a nice guy too. But that was the Andrus family. My folks, when they first came here, they lived on Pearl Street too, which is probably a block away from where the Andruses lived. And people would take care of me. I don't know, I just don't remember my brother that much in those days, but people would take care of me during the day. There was a woman, I need to mention her too, that we called her Mama King. Her name was Helen King. She was old. And she had a place on Flora. Her house was on Flora, and I'd stay there a lot. And then over the weekends, I'd stay there sometime, and we'd go to church at the Sacred Heart. It was called Sacred Heart Cathedral in those days. And then I'd go to church in the Catholic Church very often, and the midnight mass and all that stuff. Well, anyway, her husband worked for the railroad company, and he got killed. So she was alone. And after a while, thank goodness, my folks said, "Why don't you come live with us?" So Mama King came live with us on Colonial Avenue, and I guess she had got free. That's another part of my life. She got free tickets to go wherever she wanted to on the railroad, and we went all over the United States, including we went over to Cuba on her passes. And everybody loved Mama King. In fact, we had a statue of the Virgin Mary in the hallway. I mean, that was part of the house. And she was a great lady, a great part of my life. She also added to my way of looking at things morally. Not that I'm all that great, I'm not talking about it, but I tried to live right. And she had a lot to do with it. And but we went all over. She had relatives all over in Monroe, Louisiana, and Shreveport, and New Jersey, California, and it was a great life. And I've had all the way through my life, I've been extremely lucky. And I had Berna for 60 years. I could have taken a few more years of Berna, but it's the way it is. That's the life.
Thank you very much.
I could kept on going, you know.